So what happens in terms of existing as an observer within your reality is that you will more tend to go into seclusion, self-seclusion. Because what does a controller do? It stands in a point of dominance, power, like a king, which in that aspect manifests an aloneness, which goes with it automatically because you have to stand in a point of perceived responsibility of your reality, but that perceived responsibility of yourself and your reality you've defined as a king, in essence, that must stand alone, must have a dominant stance, because it has a point of, within that, a king's definition as being that of power. Therefore you'll go into seclusion, because if you look at a king that's portrayed within movies and things like that, they're always existing as you're currently existing within your reality.
Yeah. So the seclusion is that retreat or stepping back.
Yes, where you're not.
To that.
That's an outflow, consequential outflow point of the retreat and reservation. The retreat and reservation point is coming as a manifest physical outplay of you accepting and allowing this point of control instead of living. At the same time, there's still parts of you that you want control of, that you don't want to let go inside your mind. Meaning there's still secret chambers that's existing in your head that you don't want to let go of, that you want control over because you've defined it within the definition of and as you as a controller within your world and your reality.
Yeah, I can see those points clearly. I mean, there are certain things that I hold on to as a definition, which I'm not always conscious of, but I realize in the way that I react to certain things that I do have a point that I define myself as.
But remember, you're still only looking at negative. There's also positive polarity to secret chambers within your mind, so to speak. So you have to look at, for example, where in your head you still, for example, play in terms of fantasizing about different life, different worlds, people, where you go in your head and you play out scenes and things like that. That application is still a holographic imagery projection in which beings go into to escape reality for a moment, wherein that is seen as a form of enjoyment or pleasure, instead of realizing or becoming the expression of living, wherein pleasure and enjoyment becomes a point of, or manifests through sharing self, which is a completely different experience. So you have to look at where and how and with what within your mind you're still allowing yourself to participate in playouts in relation to both positive and negative aspects. Because remember, in terms of walking the process, in terms of stopping the mind, you've got to look at both negative and positive. So the mind exists in and as both polarities. It doesn't help you only stop the negative in terms of only looking at reactions you have. You have to also look at your pleasure points or enjoyment points where you accept and allow yourself to go into within your mind.
Yeah.
Meaning pleasure and enjoyment that's defined according to imagery and pictures and playouts. That could be simple things. You've got to be specific within those points in terms of seeing where your mind, or where you go into your mind in both positive and negative aspects. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense.
Because if you only work on the negative, you're still feeding the positive, and therefore, in essence, justifying still remaining defined within and as the mind. But you're using that justification through saying, like, for example, I'm working on my process, I'm stopping my thoughts, my reactions, but yet secretly there's still points that you accept and allow yourself to go into within your mind that's pleasure or enjoyment based. Does that make sense?
Right.
Many beings miss that.
I see what you mean.
It's fine details. It could be a fleeting moment, daydreaming, of various things. You've got to be aware of that, because that's become such a natural thing to do for people that they don't realize the actual consequential effect it has on their living within actual reality. Because then that point of, let's say for example, there is a pleasure or enjoyment point within your mind that you often visit. Then what happens is that pleasure or enjoyment completely possess you, and then you don't live in actual reality.
Yeah.
And then you miss what self-enjoyment and self-pleasure is within participating with someone in expression within living in physical. So you have to see where you've created such points within your mind, both positive and negative.
Yeah, I had arrived at that point where I realized, like, okay, I have to see where this happens, because I realized, like, okay, there's this pattern that I'm still playing out.
Yeah, where your mind's still possessing you in both positive and negative aspects.
Yeah.
So you're participating in a mind reality instead of in actual physical reality. Then what happens is you, through your mind reality, become an observer of actual reality instead of a participant. Then you'll use the actual reality to feed your mind reality.
Yeah, I see. Okay. Yeah, I see this mechanism, and I see where I've done this, or points that it happens basically, even though you can at some point not be bothered by it, but when it comes back then you know, like, okay,
yeah,
it's still there.
Yeah, no, you've got to really physically, practically move through these points. So you've got to, what I suggest is, in terms of solution-wise, you've got to push yourself to participate in physical, actual reality with beings. You've got to balance out your day in terms of sitting in front of the computer and being out in physical reality. Because at the moment, your computer is another escapism point that you're using to be able to experience this point of self-seclusion that's manifesting due to your stance within wanting to control your reality within the definition of you in essence being a king, from your definition, originating from your definition of your idea of responsibility. Self-responsibility comes, or what self-responsibility means is taking responsibility for who you are. You start with yourself within who you are first. Then from there, you start directing your reality. Then whatever happens in your reality won't bring up a reaction. What will immediately come up is, how do I direct this point to an effective solution?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I see that.
So I suggest balance out your day, see if you can participate more in terms of like working out in the farm, in nature. Just communicating, does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Because otherwise your mind reality will take over in terms of full possession, wherein you'll completely lock yourself out of actual reality, and then it becomes even more tough to get out of that one. Like really tough, because then you've got to break down everything that's manifested within you. Then you've got to literally start completely all over again from a blank slate, and that usually happens through where your whole outer reality kind of like falls apart, because you've linked your outer reality to your mind reality. If your outer reality falls apart, your inner reality will fall apart, meaning the mind reality. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So instead of having to go to that point, balance out your world. Work in front of the computer for a certain amount of time. Make sure you participate in actual reality for an amount of time. With Marlene, remember touch, remember communication, even just sitting with her, lying down with her for a moment, just being physical in various ways. Just really coming out of that point of mind reality seclusion. You do it through physically pushing yourself to physically participate, because that will already alter your mind state from observer to participant.
Yeah, I see what you mean.